Imagine this: you stand at the edge of a vast, impenetrable darkness. It's not physical, it's the void that opens when you suddenly realize the fragility of everything you've built your life upon. Your certainties crumble, your convictions waver. The stories you've told yourself about who you are and why you matter begin to unravel at the seams. This is the abyss, not a location, but a psychological precipice where meaning itself threatens to dissolve. What happens when we peer into this darkness? When we confront the possibility that our carefully constructed realities are elaborate illusions? Why do some retreat in terror while others leap willingly into the unknown? Perhaps more disturbingly, what if the abyss isn't something we encounter, but something we carry within us, waiting to be acknowledged? The paradox that haunts us is simple yet devastating. The deeper we search for solid ground, the more everything dissolves beneath our feet. And yet, it's only by surrendering to this dissolution that we might discover what lies beyond our familiar prisons of perception. This confrontation with the abyss isn't accidental. It's woven into the very fabric of human consciousness. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this when he warned, "If you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you." What he recognized was not merely poetic. It was a psychological truth about the human condition that we've spent centuries trying to escape. The hidden problem lies in our desperate flight from uncertainty. Since childhood, we construct elaborate psychological fortresses against the chaos of existence. Carl Jung called this the creation of the persona, the mask we wear to hide our shadow selves, not just from others but from our own awareness. We build mental architectures of certainty not because they're true, but because we cannot bear the alternative. This avoidance is not without consequence. Viktor Frankl, having survived the unimaginable horrors of concentration camps, observed that man's search for meaning is his primary motivational force, not pleasure, not power, but meaning. Yet meaning itself requires confronting the void. As Sartre famously asserted, man is condemned to be free, forced to create meaning in a universe that offers none inherently. The psychological roots of our aversion to the abyss run deeper still. Our brains evolved to seek patterns, to create order from chaos. Neuroscientists have shown that uncertainty activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. We are, in essence, biologically predisposed to avoid the very confrontation that might set us free. Society compounds this problem. As Huxley observed, we've created entire civilizations designed to distract us from the fundamental questions of existence. Our social structures, entertainment, and even intellectual pursuits often serve as elaborate diversions from the trembling ground beneath our feet. We build towers of dogma and doctrine, religious, political, scientific, not because they're infallible, but because they shield us from the vertigo of uncertainty. Yet the abyss remains, waiting, and its patience is infinite. The price of avoiding the abyss manifests in ways both subtle and profound. Your life becomes an elaborate exercise in avoidance, not of physical danger, but of psychological depth. You sleepwalk through existence, mistaking comfort for fulfillment, distraction for purpose, information for wisdom. This unconscious evasion operates through powerful cognitive biases. Consider the confirmation bias, the tendency to selectively perceive only what reinforces your existing beliefs. Or the narrative fallacy, our compulsion to create stories that explain random events, imposing false coherence on chaos. These aren't merely intellectual errors, they're psychological defense mechanisms against the vertigo of uncertainty. Neurologically, this avoidance rewires your brain. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex thought and self-awareness, becomes subordinate to the amygdala's fear responses. You become literally incapable of seeing what threatens your psychological constructs. The mind creates blind spots not by accident, but by design. The cultural consequences are equally insidious. Entire societies oscillate between mindless hedonism and rigid fundamentalism, two sides of the same coin of avoidance. Political discourse degenerates into tribal signaling. Art becomes entertainment rather than exploration. Religion calcifies into dogma rather than mystery. Each represents a collective flight from the abyss. Most devastatingly, this avoidance hollows you from within. The psychologist James Hollis calls this the middle passage, that moment in life when the strategies that once served you begin to fail. Relationships feel empty despite outward success. Achievements bring diminishing satisfaction. The gnawing sense grows that something essential remains undiscovered, unlived. This is the true horror, not that you might peer into the abyss and be destroyed, but that you might reach the end of your life never having truly faced it at all. The path to liberation begins with a counterintuitive realization: you must stop running. Stop fighting.
Stop avoiding.
What if the abyss is not your enemy but your ally? What if the darkness you fear is actually the womb of rebirth? Consider the ancient practice of memento mori, the contemplation of death, not as morbid obsession, but as the ultimate perspective shifter. The Stoics kept skulls on their desks not to despair, but to strip away illusion. When you confront mortality directly, trivial concerns fall away. The artificial boundaries you've built around your life become painfully obvious. This perspective reversal is not merely philosophical. Psychologically, it represents what Jung called the night sea journey, the necessary descent into the unconscious to retrieve the parts of yourself you've disowned. Those who have survived profound trauma or life-threatening illness often report a radical shift in values and perception. They face the abyss involuntarily and emerge transformed. You can choose this transformation voluntarily. Begin by questioning your certainties rather than defending them. Practice what Buddhist tradition calls beginner's mind, approaching each moment without preconceptions. Ask yourself, what if everything I believe is provisional? What if my strongest convictions are simply the stories I've told myself most often? Throughout history, those who've broken free share a common thread. They stopped seeking security and started seeking truth. Socrates embraced his ignorance. Buddha abandoned comfort for enlightenment. Frankl found meaning in suffering. Each discovered that freedom lies not in avoiding the abyss, but in diving into it consciously. The most radical form of rebellion is attention. Not the scattered, superficial attention of everyday life, but the penetrating, unwavering gaze that peers beyond appearances. Turn toward what you've been avoiding. Examine your fears not as obstacles, but as signposts pointing toward your unexplored depths. This is not comfortable work. It should not be. Freedom never is. Here is the revelation that awaits at the bottom of the abyss. There is no bottom. The darkness you fear is not a pit, but a passage. The void is not empty, it is pregnant with possibility. When you finally surrender to uncertainty, you discover that meaning is not something you find, it's something you create. The existential terror that once paralyzed you becomes the very foundation of your freedom. As Kierkegaard understood, anxiety is not the enemy of fulfillment, but its prerequisite, the dizziness of freedom that accompanies true choice. The abyss reveals itself as the raw material of your becoming. Those who have ventured furthest into this darkness, mystics, artists, revolutionaries, return with a common insight. What appeared as nothingness was actually the fertile void from which all creation springs. The Japanese aesthetic concept of ma, the meaningful emptiness between objects, captures this paradox. The silence between musical notes creates the melody. The empty space in a room defines its architecture. Your consciousness works the same way. The gaps between certainties are not flaws in your understanding, but the apertures through which new understanding flows. This is why the greatest breakthroughs in science, art, and human growth emerge not from accumulated knowledge, but from its deliberate suspension. What you've been seeking was never certainty, but aliveness. Not answers, but the courage to live the questions themselves. Not solid ground, but the ability to dance on shifting sands. Look again at the abyss. It's not darkness you see, but the absence of artificial light, the necessary condition for seeing the stars. What terrified you was never the void itself, but your resistance to it. And in that final surrender, you discover the ultimate paradox. Only by accepting groundlessness do you find something to stand on. The abyss never goes away. It was never meant to. It is the open space in which your life unfolds.